Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm painting a quick watercolor of a beach scene with some dark clouds, some darkish rocks, a wave burst, and a little bit of beach. So I'm just laying in a very light cobalt blue wash. You can see that there. I have drawn in a pencil drawing of the rocks and the horizon line and sort of where I want the clouds to be. Now, I don't have a photograph for this. I don't have a sketch that I'm working from. This is just a compilation of times being out at the beach. And if you're familiar with my channel, you'll know that I do quite a lot of shorts that are showing me painting at the beach. So I'm using, I used a cobalt blue wash to fill this first layer in, and then I went back in with some ultramarine blue and some burnt umber. So cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, burnt umber, a little bit of yellow ochre and some red, tiny bit of red, cadmium red that I put in on the horizon line later, and some sort of Venetian red or English red, which is quite an opaque colour, are really the only colours that were used here, along with the cobalt light, that's a Daniel Smith, a greeny colour. So it's a very limited palette, and you can see I'm just drawing in, filling in some of the information, the calligraphic information of the rocks as they sit on the foreground. So just enjoy this for a minute and I will return. So that was my first layer, and then you saw I used the hairdryer. And the palette knife I was using there was a number 4, and I just used it to scratch in and to move some of the paint around, just to make some more sort of rocky shapes. So feel free to experiment with that. So now I'm going back in with a juicier mix, which is burnt umber and ultramarine blue. And I'm just darkening where the clouds are. And this is a hardware store brush. It's a bristle brush that I actually really like using. And you can see I just added some water to the mixture just to gradate out across the top there so that the clouds don't all just end up as a dark line across the top. And I've preserved some of the white in the middle, and I'm going to lay in some lighter grey sort of clouds, so that that ties that piece in as well. So you want to vary your values. You want dark values and light values and different sort of shapes and different ways of using the brush. So this painting that I'm doing as a demonstration isn't about let's copy this painting. I just want to show you some ways of using different tools and tips and techniques that you can try out in your paintings. You don't have to stick to the traditional brushes or traditional palette color or whatever. You can experiment. So we'll just watch for a bit more and then I'll return again. I will just say that using the cobalt light with some burnt umber in it makes a beautiful colour for the waves in the foreground, where the water is all churned up with the sand and the sea spray is flying. It makes a beautiful colour. So I do encourage you to try that out. It's on its own, it's quite a harsh colour, it's quite a strong colour, but when you mix it with other colours, it becomes very useful in my palette for seascaping. So now I've made a juicier wash of burnt umber and a little bit of Venetian red or English red, which is a slightly opaque colour, and I'm laying in the rocks in the foreground, and I want them to be a little bit stronger than you can see in the foreground in the distance, with those rocks are very light. So the foreground ones want to be dark so that they pull you forward in space within the picture plane. And the brush I'm using does get quite calligraphic, I draw with it, and it can be quite jumbly a little bit, so I did actually glaze over the top of the rocks in the foreground to quieten it all down. And there I was doing some flicking, which is always fun, especially in a beach scene. And that's some yellow ochre. So that's another technique that you can try out. You don't want to overdo it, it doesn't go all over the painting, but certainly for the beach in the foreground, it does give your eye something to think about, pebbles and bits of detritus on the beach. And if you look at the composition, you can begin to see that it's a bit of an S curve. From the top right corner, you sort of move down to the clouds on the horizon, and then across to the rock, sort of brings you across the horizon to the rocks on the right. And then it sweeps you round the rocks and back to the left at the front. So you can just see a sort of an S, and that helps your eye move around the composition. If something's too dark, you can just dab it off with a tissue. In the area that I'm working on now, I'm actually going to put in a breaking wave on that piece of rock so that I wanted it a little bit darker so that the white will stand out. So I will be using white gouache. So just continuing with the rocks. Now this is to warm it up. I think I've put my brush into the sort of Venetian red or a Indian red, which is quite an opaque colour, but I wanted to have a little bit more warmth. This is very cool coloured painting, and I wanted to have some more warmth in the foreground, again to pull it forward towards the viewer. So I used a little bit of opaque and then just blended it gently along the beach there so that it wasn't just in one spot. I wanted to thread it through the beach in the foreground. And a little bit more yellow ochre. And here I got a little bit of cadmium red, very, very, very diluted. And you can see I'm just gently, gently wiping it in across the horizon there. Again, just a hint of warmth in that horizon to balance off some of these cold blues and greens. Putting a little bit of cobalt into the rocks where they would have been rock pools or whatever. So it's quite full of brush marks. It's quite textural when you look closely at this painting. And I quite like that. It's quite energetic. And it's very free. I mean, that was the whole point of doing this. It was a sort of a freedom of expression about rocks and sea and waves and clouds and the whole emotional event of going down to the beach. Just one or two darks there they will bounce off the white that I will be putting in for the crashing waves. And here is a fan brush. Now it's not a floppy watercolor painter's fan brush. It's a bristle fan brush that you might find for oil painting. And I found it, there we go, that's my crashy wave. I found it was excellent for doing some splatter and some linear marks that created the feel of the waves. And I'm using white gouache. And it really did give me that feel of waves. And I even used it just for a breaking wave. So I had a lot of fun with that.